Welcome back to Movies Recapped. Today, I will show you an American action drama film of prisoners titled Shawshank Redemption. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and have a good day.
The famous Shawshank prison was very lively that day, because that day is the day to receive new prisoners. One of them is a bank executive, named Andy. He was sentenced to life in prison. There's an unwritten law in the prison. It was on the first day. The prisoners will bet against each other on who will die first. This old man's name is Red. As long as you have money, there's nothing he can't do. He caught Andy in an unexpected way. When the prisoner is brought here, they will be greeted with a high-pressure water gun. Then he was put in a cell. If you have a normal life and suffer this situation, who can stand this? There's a fat guy who can't take it anymore. He cried and asked to come out. As a result, he was beaten to death by the warden, although this made Andy shiver with fear. But he dared not do anything. This surprised Red. He started to notice this man. Andy, who just arrived, has a lot of thoughts. He can't talk to people. His words and behavior are not compatible with the environment here. Until a month later he actively went looking for Red. Red thinks he has a purpose. Won't you get it right away? Just personal preference, although doubtful, but when he saw the hammer in Red's hand, he dispelled his worries. What do you think if you use this small object to dig a hole? Then you may have to dig for hundreds of years. Andy had a miserable time here. He was beaten by 3 people, but Andy did not show weakness, even fought hard. Life in prison goes on like that. 2 years go by quickly, until one day the prison arranged outdoor labor camps. Andy overheard that the warden wanted to buy a car, but he complains that the tax is too high. Andy, after he heard, put down the mop and go to the jailer. The prisoners thought he was crazy. When he comes close, the guards thought he was about to rebel. They all loaded ammunition into their guns. The warden was even willing to push him down, until Andy told him, I have a way to help him avoid taxes, and without paying a dime. If I can succeed, just invite us for a beer. So the day before the end of the labor session, more than 10 prisoners drinking cold beer in the sunset. This is surprising to everyone. Andy sat quietly with a smile. He looks at people and feels the taste of freedom, even if it's only a few minutes. Since then Andy became famous. Life seems to be getting better. It's not just the walls covered with posters. The 3 people who bullied him were also taken care of by the prison guards. Never dare to bully him again. Today, the warden came to check unexpectedly. He looked at the Bible in Andy's hand. Say, I like reading too. He also summed up a sentence. The way of salvation is in it. Look at the posters on the wall. Even though it's a bit non-regulatory, but it doesn't hurt to make an exception every now and then. But today's purpose is not like that. It's to see how much Andy weighs. He is a prisoner. Now he is personally received by the warden, not just an office. Even the guards in the entire prison asked him for advice on tax returns. Second year, guards from all over the city come here. Andy is the most famous in this prison. Andy can even ask an assistant when he's busy, and that person is none other than Red. Andy tells him this is just the beginning. He will donate the above money to build a library. So he began to declare to the state legislature. Once a week, he wrote for a year. The city finally couldn't take it anymore. They approved your request, also gave him a box of old books. This gives Andy more fighting spirit. 2 letters in a week. Accidentally 10 years have passed. Andy patiently waits for the day to escape. The city decided to give him $500 a year for Andy to stamp the pen. Until now, Shawshank is the best prison in the city. They're working on a new project. Since then, inmates have been able to work outdoors, and the prison business is also thriving. Andy's money laundering job. And Andy also lived up to the expectations. He uses his expertise through stock securities insurance. This amount has been legalized. After the warden retires, he will become a millionaire. Don't worry about being checked, because all the evidence is fictitious. He only exists in the text, and he took advantage of the flaw in the mechanism. A few years later, the prison accepts many new inmates. One of them is very special, named Tommy. His cheerful personality made his fellow prisoners very welcome. Soon became a laughter maker. During the conversation he said that when he was in the prison he had met a person before, the man who murdered a woman and her lover, then marry someone else. Andy was a little surprised when he said, isn't that what he's talking about? He finds the warden and asks him to help Andy reverse the case. Also promised not to talk about money laundering for him. The warden thought he was threatening me, so they locked Andy in the room. They also ordered everyone to kill the narrator to avoid trouble later. This moment, Andy finally sees the darkness of this prison. Red convinced him to accept this fact. Red has been here for a long time and has seen the real face of the prison. Andy said to Red, if one day you get out, please do me a favor. Let's go near the tree in a meadow near Buxton. That place has a secret there. Red feels like he said his last words, because one of his friends said that Andy bought a rope from him. There's a limit to human patience. Maybe this is Andy's relief. 4 criminals who are fluent in math are helping the warden money laundering. But he seems to have something on his mind tonight. Wait for him to finish everything. Sat back to the room. He glanced at his friend. Looks like it's saying goodbye. Then he took the rope and sat by the bed. That night, thunder rumbled. Early next morning, the warden calls the prisoners. And he hasn't appeared for a long time. The warden entered the door to check. He was completely dumbfounded. Shawshank Prison, known as the best security prison, but prisoner Andy disappeared into thin air. The manager got very angry and called Red for questioning. And Red doesn't know anything either. The warden angrily picked up the pellet and threw it at the wall. This time, the poster on the wall appeared a hole. When the poster was torn to reveal the hole in the back, only now did they realize, Andy has escaped from prison. All police officers were sent to search. Dogs are also sent, until they found a hammer. Remember what Red said, rely on this hammer to dig a tunnel. Yes, it took hundreds of years to dig, but only 20 years have passed. Andy did it. Actually from 20 years ago, Andy begins to plan. He needs a small hammer and a big poster. The rest has to depend on time. He puts stones on the field every day. 20 years later, until last night, he put the evidence in a plastic bag, then quietly exited the secret path. Wait for the thunder to come. He watches when the lightning appears. Whenever there was a thunderclap, he smashed the stone against the water pipe. The sewer is his only way out. In this way, he crawled to freedom in the stench of the sewers. He has to crawl for a long time. The length of the water pipes is up to 5 football fields. Then Andy fell into a canal. It helped me to clean the sewer, take off his prison shirt, look up at the sky and spread his arms wide. He finally got his freedom back. At this moment, Andy waited 20 years for it. The next day, a middle-aged man walks into the bank. Before, he only appeared in paperwork. Which surprised everyone was, over 1 million deposits in his account. Here's everything he did for money laundering. Then he gave all the relevant documents to hand over to the police. Wait until police cars surround the prison. The warden opened the safe, opened the Bible left by Andy. He looks at the front. You are right, this is salvation. Looking back, the fact that Andy put the hammer in there, in the end, the warden committed suicide for fear of being arrested. Several months later, Red received a postcard. There's no name written on it, but there is a stamp. He knows that Andy has left the United States, transoceanic. Andy driving under the late afternoon sun. After years of ups and downs, he finally has a new life. A few years later, Red is getting old. He was pardoned and released from prison. He came under the tree Andy mentioned before. Red found a tin box and inside there was a letter. Andy left him an address, white sand and blue sea. Red came as promised. Two old friends looking at each other and smiling. They meet again after a long time.
Don't forget to subscribe, it helps the channel, and hit that notification bell to be notified for daily vids. Thank you for watching.